Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm Emily Young with NC Tech, and thank you for joining today for our Talent Network discussion on hyperautomation and combining emerging technologies to amplify digital transformation. We have an incredible panel lined up for you today. Just want to say a big thank you to our Talent Network sponsors, APC Inc., our presenting sponsor, and Right Direction Technology. We are going to get started here with our conversation. Just a couple quick housekeeping items. If you all would like to use the Q&A function, our moderator, Tony Franco with APC, will let you know how questions will be going today during the discussion. And if you have any other questions for me, you can find the direct chat if you have any issues with your technology or anything else like that. So without further ado, we will be recording today's session, and I will turn it over to Tony.
Hello, everybody. My name is Tony Franco, and as Emily mentioned, I'm with APC, and we are a IT workforce solutions and consulting firm, and very excited to be moderating this topic today. I'd like to begin with some introductions and then follow that up with jumping right into our topic of hyperautomation. So with that, let's start with Carrie introducing yourself, and we'll go around the table.
Hi, everybody. My name is Carrie Patterson. I'm a director of technology for Optum, which is under the United Health Group organization. And I focus in on clinical decision support, which is transforming patient-provider experience. I'm also on the Clinical Guild, where we coach and mentor our college students about clinic settings.
Thank you, Carrie. Lori, would you like to introduce yourself?
Great. Thanks, Tony. Hi, everyone. My name is Lori Schaefer, and I'm from IBM. I'm also on the NC Tech board. At IBM, I actually lead the GBS, or Global Business Consulting Group, their technology team. And I'm actually focused very heavily on workforce management enablement. And this is across all of our processes, workflows, automation technology, and data for the company. Back to you, Tony.
Thank you, Lori. And Bill, please introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bill Talone. I'm Associate Dean at the College of Computing Informatics at UNC Charlotte. And at the university, I have a number of duties, but two that are, I think, relevant to this conversation. One is that I oversee our graduate programs, which are very much part of our continuing education responsibility to the community. And the other is I am very active in our in external relations for the college. So I interact quite a bit with the community and try to hear the requirements and bring those back to our programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. So let's get started. I'm going to start off with the first topic, and that is hyperautomation has been named one of Gartner's top 10 strategic technology trends for 2021. Organizations now more than ever are looking to automate their processes in order to scale their capabilities, increase efficiencies, and lower costs. But as humans and machines work together to meet new organizational goals, there's some myths that have evolved, such as hyperautomation is temporary, and hyperautomation will become too smart and take over. Another very important one is that we'll really drill down on today is hyperautomation will eliminate jobs. So how would you describe hyperautomation to someone who's completely unfamiliar with the term? Let's start with you, Lori.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Tony. This is a great topic and a great way to introduce it. There are a lot of myths out there, and hyperautomation, as you talked about, really, builds on automation. Through hyperautomation, obviously, it deals with a lot of advanced technologies that they'll hear, right? So artificial intelligence and machine learning, right? And advanced analytics. Right. So obviously it's increasing as we're going through it. It's helping our automate our process, but it is also there to augment our people. You can call them humans, right? But they're here to augment our team. So several technologies very strongly focused on the technology side of it. What we're actually seeing today is an evolution, and that evolution, we actually call it extreme automation. And from extreme automation, it's comprised of kind of what I talked about earlier, but really about process, about talent, technology, and data, right? And for us, that's really taking and digitizing what we do and bringing it into an automated environment, and then actually taking that across the organization to make it work hand in hand with our team members. Now, I can go on a little bit more, but just kind of give, we're going to explore this obviously as we go through this, but just to give everyone a little bit of some interesting facts is that approximately 80% of all of the companies that we talk with, they're doing some sort of automation, right? But if you look at it at scale, there's only a handful. There's like 7% of companies are actually doing hyperautomation at scale. So that's, a huge opportunity for us to understand. But really, as you look at this as a cross-organization and intelligent workflow, the estimates right now is that over the next 3 years, it's going to grow by 7 times in this space. So there's a lot of investment, and there's a lot of need for us as the talent workforce to be part of that journey. So back to you.
Okay, excellent. Carrie, your thoughts on how you...
In the healthcare space, definitely automation is required, because if you see the provider when you come to the doctor, the last thing they want to do is be type, click, click, click. And the electronic health record is very cumbersome for them to use, information scattered all over the place. So there's huge opportunity in healthcare, especially for your provider when they're engaging with you. I always envision, the Star Trek, can I just do a scan and it tell me everything that's going on? So we're definitely looking forward to that future that's personalized to you and not, generic of 5,000 white males, and you're an African American woman, you're going, well, I don't know if that applies to me. So we're definitely trying to move in that direction.
Excellent. And Bill, your thoughts?
I think that both of those definitions were very helpful. And the only thing I'd add to that is that we have to remember that it's not just technology, that people are central to all of what we're doing here. And so we tend to focus on the technology quite a bit, but, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, I'm sure, but the human dimension can't be lost. And it's not that technology is replacing people, but it's reshaping their participation in what we do. And the goal is to help us, not to replace us in this. So that's just, I think, one important dimension that we should remember as we think about hyperautomation, that we should go beyond just thinking about technology.
No, that's great. That's a great point, Bill. So which leads to the next topic or question. So many organizations are already implementing digital transformation to meet their business needs and improve that user customer experience and manage their customers' expectations. And like Lori, you said, essentially it's really it's a nice to have, but it's becoming a must have. So what are your thoughts on how automation can accelerate or build upon digital transformation strategies that are already in place? What are your thoughts, Carrie?
So in our space with the provider, I'm focused in on clinical decision support. So that's bringing aggregated data about the patient for the provider to be able to assess the right information at the right time in the doctor's workflow, engaging with the patient. And right now, like I was saying, there's a lot of click, click, click that they have to do. And what we're doing is enhancing that information in a way that the provider can consume it to get a broader picture of what's going on with the patient, that it's not, a list of things where the doctor's trying to focus and absorb that, but a graphical way for them to be able to absorb that information quickly and be able to ask the right questions at the right time with the patient in order to address their real needs. And so for us, it's very important to be able to automate a lot of that click, click, click that goes on. There are several interesting books that kind of talk about that, and I'll share more on that later.
Okay, great. And Lori, your thoughts?
Sure. Carrie, you know, your particular field and area is so relevant and so real time on all of our minds every day. So really appreciate everything that you're doing in that space. And that whole user experience, it's so true, but especially in the moments that matter, right? And especially as, you know, they're sitting down with their provider and going, what do I need to do? And to take away that noise and to bring that in front of them and give the doctors the ability to really be in the moment and to help them instead of clicking. I think we've all heard that, right? So for me, in my role as a technology leader, I had owned the data and the technology. And what was really hard for me was that in order to drive dramatic change, you really needed to get into the process side, right? You need to re-engineer that process, that user experience. And so fortunately, my management team saw that and we saw the vision and we actually organizationally changed and pulled all of workforce management together. So as I mentioned on the enablement, the process, the IT, the automation and data. So for me, that's where hyperautomation is actually part of the whole portfolio for us to reimagine how we're doing the work. So it's a must-have, and it's something that when you culturally look at it and see people committing to that from across the organization, it really helps us to move the mountains.
No, those are some great points. I think, you know, I definitely agree with you that the pandemic's definitely accelerated, you know, transformation, and now the next leg is hyperautomation. It's interesting how quickly companies have had to react to this.
True.
I'm interested, Bill, on your side, you know, what are your thoughts on the acceleration piece of it, and, you know, the strategies that are in place and how companies can build on those?
Yeah, that I picked up on things that both Carrie and Lori were highlighting there, and it connects back to some of my opening statements about the human dimension of this. That when we recognize the socio-technical aspect of this requires us to be thinking about and reimagining how we do our tasks, how we execute our processes. We have to. Sometimes we can do harm if we're only thinking about replacing people with technology, and too often we think in those terms, and I think that's the wrong way to be thinking about this. And I use an analogy, or a couple of analogies that I think drive this point home. Until we were able to fly, all we could do was drive on the ground. And when a plane was developed, we handed it off to someone, and then they started driving it on the ground. It doesn't provide any advantage, and probably would be, in fact, a disadvantage. So the same thing in terms of if we always cut wood with an axe and someone handed you a saw, and then you started swinging the saw at the wood thinking that's how you use it. But when we reimagine how we use technology and how we execute our processes, all of a sudden we discover we can cut wood more quickly and more precisely. And I think of that in terms of the decisions we're making. If we can increase the speed and the efficacy of our decisions by reshaping that decision process and how we incorporate technology into it, I think that will accelerate the adoption process that we're all facing today.
No, those are great. Those are some great points. I really like those analogies. I may have to steal those from you, but we'll definitely do that. So let's drill down a little deeper on one of the myths that probably concerns employees the most, and that's, you know, can robots, you know, take away human jobs? And I know we've touched a little bit on it so far, but you know, and the answer is probably not. But you know, the statistical and analytical capabilities of the human mind are irreplaceable, I think, as Bill's really, you know, touched on. What are suggestions for how to encourage confidence, you know, within employees? Because I'm sure they're very concerned when they see this coming down the line, that, you know, that hyperautomation is here to help them. And what are some of the challenges of getting new employees' skills into the market at a quicker pace? I'll go back to you, Bill, on these.
Sure, I think I can kick us off on this. Well, the first thing I would say to people is that we've been here before. That technology is constantly evolving and advancing. What we're seeing today is just the speed of change is far beyond what maybe we've experienced ever before. whenever we've introduced new technologies, that has not led to all of a sudden we have fewer jobs out there. In fact, just the opposite has happened. When you look at where we were 4 or 5 decades ago, as computing technology entered into the workplace, it didn't eliminate and shrink that workforce, but in fact it expanded it because there were new jobs, new markets, new opportunities. And so on the confidence side, we know that people still make decisions, and at least the most important decisions. So I think we should take confidence that we've been here before. Now, what are some of the challenges? Well, I think for us, and being in higher education, this is at the forefront of our thoughts, is we need to be rethinking what the education model as a whole. The traditional model is you spend 20 years in school and then you spend 45 years in the profession. And I think that model has to change, and I'm not alone in this thought, because what we have really now is maybe even as we start thinking out, 80 years of education, right? That this is a lifelong process, and organizations need to be thinking about this just as much as employees. That they have to recognize that the technology that we're using today may be obsolete in 24 months or in 4 years or in 6 years. So we don't develop a skill, develop a talent, and then that talent serves us in that way as an organization for the next 45 years. Rather, we're constantly reinventing ourselves, we're constantly reskilling and upskilling, and that has to be a partnership between the employer and the employee. It's in both interests to be addressing that challenge in that way. So I think I'll let our other panelists chime in at this point.
Before we do that, I just have a quick question. I'm curious. So if a company, identify either going through hyperautomation and they identify that they need to reskill, how would they go about maybe collaborating with, your university to maybe create programs that not only help their current employees, but also maybe attract new ones?
So the partnership with higher education, I think, is critical in this regard, and we're recognizing this too. We're developing new programs more frequently and more rapidly these days. We're changing program delivery, where we are rethinking how our programs develop the skills that employers need, and we're recognizing that employers need to be a part of that process. And so that includes direct partnerships with organizations. It includes participation in program advisory boards. It includes helping us understand the requirements of their organization and the interests of their employees. And as I said, gone are the days where all this preparation happens and then you're released into the workforce. Now it's a different model where you're always thinking about, as an employee, professional development. What's that next skill? What's that next? And the employee is going to learn that from their employer and the marketplace, but they also have to maintain almost like a lifetime engagement with the institutions of higher ed. That I'm constantly going back to the academic setting, but that academic setting is not something that's separated from industry. It's something that works in partnership, so that in that academic setting, I'm learning through experience in the workplace. And so those are just a few thoughts on that. Maybe first and foremost is you could reach out to someone like me, and I'd be happy to introduce you to what we're doing at the College of Computing Informatics at UNC Charlotte, and how to become more engaged with our students in their development and with our faculty in the development of our programs.
Excellent. That's excellent. Lori, what are your thoughts?
Sure. So, thanks for that. This is really near and dear to my heart. And, Bill, I love what you guys are doing at UNC Charlotte. You really listen and you act upon it. And you've taken many of your coursework that you quickly move to a virtual setting and are, opening up that aperture. Your dean Fatma is also on NC Tech's board, right? So you guys are taking huge steps on trying to not only get into the boards, but also having impact in the industry. And also love some of the programs you've done with Epic, right, where you're actually basically co-creating with industry right on your campus, right? And so there's a lot to be said about how you guys are being so proactive. I'll go back to a piece that you talked about earlier, is that we really need to make it a life engagement. And I think it's important for us as individuals, no matter where you are or what you do in the company, to always sit back and work on what is it that I need to continue to grow, right? How does my passion of what I do align with what work I'm doing and what work the company needs us to do? So, one of the discussions that we kind of need to continue to talk through is having an open dialogue with your manager, right? And with your company, because at the end of the day, each of us bring our own individual gifts to the company. And it's really about how do we continue to amplify and bring new skills to our toolbox. So, one of the things that we do at IBM is we have a lot of personal education that is brought to us. We have skill requirements that we need to continue to develop on our Think 40 and a number of our Your Career, Your Development. But we actually identify what are hot skills and hot roles, and then give opportunities for people to grow in that. But I really believe it starts with a conversation with your manager, and to sit down and say, where are my strengths and where are my gaps, and how do I continue to keep growing at that? And to Bill's point, you got to find that passion, right? You got to find what makes you tick every day and start to develop. You have a curiosity for data science. Coursera and a number of programs actually that, Bill and many of the universities offer. Go and learn about data science. Go learn about R, learn about Python, take some introductory classes, and start really, scratching at the surface. But there's a lot of different areas in automation that you can go after. The other part, and we talked about it in some of our prerequisite to get together, and what we wanted to talk about is the idea about IT certifications plus having certified education. And I think it does require a mix of both of those, but there's some IT certifications that are, hot right now, hot on the market, and you should start to lean into that.
Those are great points, Lori. I think it reminded me of a client that we have that is very involved in the professional development of their employees. And they assign career agents. So not only do they have their manager to speak to, there's someone in HR that's considered their career agent that helps them track and plan their professional development, because they're a heavy technology company, and they have a lot of strategic initiatives that are not only today, but they're 3, 5, 10 years out.
Yeah.
So they're trying to ensure that they have their employees skilled to meet those demands and hit those initiatives. So that's a great point. I think that's something. It's almost like when you're in college, and I think you'd agree with this, Bill, that you have your counselor. You're constantly meeting with your counselor to talk about your curriculum, and but when you get your career, that seems to end. I think this is probably an excellent opportunity with hyperautomation and the advent of it, that you kind of maybe go back to that model even in professional arena. Carrie, I'm sure you have a number of employees that are impacted by the level of automation and technology changes in healthcare. How do you go about ensuring the competence of those employees?
So thank you for the question. It's really an interesting journey when I look at it. For us in clinical decision support, we're looking at guidelines and like American Diabetes Association, how do you manage diabetes and convert that into computing code. And what's really interesting is computer scientists are going to look at the guideline very differently than your healthcare workers. And so for us, not only are we having to apply data science, computer science, and medical science all combining. So as Bill was alluding to earlier, it's a community effort, and we have to learn to bridge the gap, if you will, between them. And a lot of it is OJT, on the job training of there isn't a career coach that's going to say, to be great at your job, you need to do these things, because we're evolving and learning in real time. So it's really having that mindset, teaching people to have the mindset of being able to think differently, being able to ask questions that are not yes, no, validating your assumptions, but more searching for information, help people to ask more broader questions to gain better insights of what's going on. One of the things I do with our computer science students when they come in is to have them implement a decision tree on headache, the guideline on headaches of what's the appropriate use of imaging. And it's really funny how they'll go do this decision tree, and you'll have a medical profession who'll look at it, a clinician will say, well, the first question that I ask, is it an adult or not? That's the first thing they think of. And the computer science totally misses that. They go right into the raw data and making decisions based on that. But there's some other information that you need to know to be clinically accurate. And so we have to bridge that communication gap of what you don't know as a computer scientist or what you don't know as a data scientist in order to relate in the medical science world. So a lot of it is, how do we use design thinking, bringing in a lot of different tool sets to help people solve the problems.
No, those are some great points. I know the cross-functional communication is probably more important now than ever, because hyperautomation is giving humans a chance to to loop in with robotic process automation and different technologies. So they're basically working side by side together with technology, whereas before they were probably siloed and kind of in their own worlds. Now they're really having to collaborate, and communication is more important than ever. How do you think, and I'll throw this one back to Lori, how do you think this change has impacted your organization's approach to hiring and building your technology teams? Because Carrie's point of this communication has got to be hugely important now.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I mentioned it a little bit earlier when I was talking about my particular role. Organizational alignment does help significantly, at least what I'm seeing, right? And this is really the heart of my job. And it's about, removing some of those barriers, bringing decision-making to an organization so that they're empowered to be able to make this change across process, automation, technology, and data. And like I said, we took this to heart. We actually recreated the organization, and it is dedicated to our workforce management processes and support. And this team that I lead is actually about enabling IBM's workforce to support our customers and clients, 100 to 200,000 people that we need to have at the right levels, the right skills, the right time. When Carrie was talking earlier, it all comes back to my supply chain background too, right? Right skills, right time, right place. And it's just so important that we keep going back to those fundamentals. But what we did is we actually brought together that support function across the end-to-end organization. We redesigned and are continually redesigning the intelligent workflows. So we're actually building a cognitive enterprise, and that goes from the supply that's needed of our resources on our accounts that we have, and then at what level and skills, to the demand of what our clients need, to actually fulfilling, putting the right people on the right accounts to make that happen, and also to look at our performance of that and those teams, but also to look at the capabilities that we're building. Do we have that we have a forecast of what skills need to be coming on so that we can retrain and reskill, and how to really focus on the person and the talent that we have there. So, when I step back, that's the vision, that's what we wanted to go do. And how we did that is we actually sat back and said, you know, let's start documenting. Just let's start writing it down. What do we do? How do you document your process? How do you digitize those processes? We actually laid that all out and we put it on IBM Essentials platform. And what that allowed us to do is to expose and share all of the connectivity points of those processes. So we can hook in with HR, we can hook in with finance, we can hook in with procurement on our contractor population. And we can pull all of those things together because we started first by putting the processes in a digitized platform so we could lay it out. Then what we saw were opportunities by which we could change the workflow. How could we actually bring data better in? How could we, change that workflow? Then let's automate. So, one of our key pieces is just don't put it out there how you do it today and then automate it, because there's so much more standardization and efficiencies that we can do. But as we did that, we allowed and have our teams to actually lay that out and do the design. And the reason why we've done that is so that we have better insights. The person behind the process is the subject matter expert that's going to help us, move this forward. And we have much better insights to data, much better job opportunities for people. And it allows people to automate the easy stuff and then concentrate on higher work product, which is much better. Plus, it allows our decision making to be much more informed. So automation transformation actually can be done at each layer. So, from the process to the data and in the whole enterprise operating model. So anyway, I know I could talk about this forever, but at the end of the day, I think you've got to start and build it on a platform by which you can use some of this and then continually work to re-engineer those operations. Our process actually is in an environment that, just like you are with technology, and you have a test bed, we actually have a test bed for our processes. So you can, tweak the process a little bit and see, the downstream impacts to it. So it's quite exciting, and I'm glad that we've organizationally pulled them together.
That sounds very exciting. I have a quick question. So when you're looking, you said it sounds like you transformed your teams.
Yeah.
So when you're looking to bring somebody new onto your team,
Yeah.
has that job description changed? Are you allowing the teams to formulate, the next team member? How does that process, or what does that look like?
It depends on which part, we're talking about, but let's talk about the workforce management team, right, who's doing it. We actually have formed squads and tribes, right, and we're much into our agile design and methodologies. We are actually looking for people who have those open minds and skills and servant leadership to really bring in, and then we're able to look at their skills and then upskill them as they come in. So part of that, and kind of going back to Carrie, is, do you have an open mind? Do you have a growth mindset? And so we're really looking for that in individuals that want to be brought onto our team.
No, that's excellent. Bill, would you have anything to add?
Sure. In some ways we're the same, but in other ways we're different, given that we're an educational institution. But this type of change is causing us to just rethink everything about our programs, and I think that's essential. I've already mentioned some of these things, new academic programs, but it's also, how do we deliver these programs? We're hearing things like we need to understand technology and context, and so that starts to shape the content of the program and also the disciplines that we bring into the definition of a given program. We hear things like, we need the education in smaller bites, and especially for our working professionals. And so in that context, we start thinking about, can you earn something like a master's degree, but it doesn't take 2 years to earn? And can you do it taking one course at a time, going part-time? And the answer is yes. And we have programs. In fact, we have 4 programs that fit this model today. And the great thing about these programs is they not only provide you the knowledge base like which you might receive in a professional certification, but they also, as one of our advisory board members characterize it, they also help you think about uncertainty and deal with uncertainty in that context, right? It's not just what you know, but how do you deal with what you don't know and adapt to that in the workplace. And so we'll have the kind of a formal announcement and launch of these 4 programs. They're all existing programs. We've just reshaped them both in content and in delivery, so that this fall you could be taking 1 course at a time, and by the spring now you've earned what we call a certificate, not a certification, but a certificate. It's postgraduate, and it's something that can apply towards, say, a future master's program. But we think about it in terms of you're being able to accumulate over time this new skill, this new understanding. And then at the undergraduate level, we're even thinking about this because this is still the pathway that people enter into the workplace. And we're thinking about things like, should computational thinking be a general education requirement? That everyone who graduates with a baccalaureate degree, should they be able to compute and interact in their discipline, whatever that major is, over data? And I tend to think the answer is yes. I'm hard pressed to find an industry, a profession that doesn't use technology in some way. And so the sooner that we can start, and this really should reach back into the K-12 arena, the sooner we can be developing these skills to think in terms of abstraction and other forms of design over data, and to realize that it's not just the data, but it's also the process, and it's also the people, and how we interact with those data have an impact on the quality of the decisions we make. I think we're going to be better off. So those are some of the things that ways that we're impacted by this change. And at the same time, we're also trying to adopt this transformation or these strategies in the business. I mean, we are still in the sense of business, right? Even though we think of education as something different, but we have employees, we have processes, and we have to rethink how we're doing things as well.
That's super interesting. And Carrie, I'm sure your hiring and building your technology teams has really been impacted by, not only hyperautomation, but by the pandemic. What are your thoughts on how it has impacted your hiring and building those technology teams out?
Well, definitely when you need this community of people and having everybody go virtual, the whole virtual experience has been somewhat of a challenge, but we're adopting other tools and so forth to be able to leverage it. Bringing in new talent, part of what I feel like we're looking for is that unicorn out there. Where are the unicorns? We need them. And all the skill sets required to do what we do is really difficult to find. There's like a handful of people that have the skill sets. So we have to look at hiring a little bit differently. Not so much do you have all the checklist, but can you adapt? Can you come into a fast-paced, undefined arena and be able to ground yourself and navigate yourself without someone telling you what to do? Can you apply critical thinking? Can you think scientific methods, of I have a hypothesis, I want to test this out. Who do I need on my team to do that? So it's really that critical thinker on their feet, be able to do improv. That's another piece too that kind of comes into play. Sure, there's extreme discipline when it comes to medicine, because there's high ethics, there's high standards, regulation, and then there's also it's someone's life, it's someone's daughter, it's someone's mother, it's someone's family member that you want to tenderly care for. So you kind of have all that going in and the wild west at the same time. So really looking for culture. Do you have the culture mindset that can jump in and navigate yourself?
Yeah, and Tony, if I can just add on, Emily, I'm right with you. Finding those unicorns are so hard. And one of the things that, we continue to do is drive an agile culture, but agile teams where you can bring in, multiple multiple skills into the team and start working together in a collaborative way. So yeah, and it is hard, right? But we are all looking for that. And when you find one, grab it, right? But at the end of the day, we have to create it. We have to create a culture and environment by which those team members can work together and become one giant unicorn, right? But I'm right there with you. I love the comment about Wild West. But to your point, the moments that matter, that ethical way of working and caring deeply about each and every one of those individuals, I really applaud how you guys are going about that. That's cool. Thank you. Sorry, Tony.
No, absolutely. Those are some great points. And Carrie, I can only imagine how hectic it's been for the healthcare industry. I know we have a couple of healthcare clients, and it's just, it's nuts. But absolutely appreciate everything you've done to support, us and people in this pandemic, because I think we'd truly be lost without the healthcare professionals and all the research and just your sense of urgency about really making a difference in people's lives, because unfortunately a lot of people have been impacted negatively by this. So definitely appreciate everything you're doing. Which kind of leads me to our next question, which, at the beginning of last year, nobody was really talking about digital transformation or hyperautomation. Really, it was kind of, you had something that's coming up quick on the horizon. But, people in the companies we dealt with had these projects in their pipelines, and they weren't funded, and they were going to happen eventually. And what we saw was, okay, we've got take a large company, 3,000 employees, we need to have everybody working remote the next week. And so digital transformation accelerated. And it was crazy how fast it's been moving over the past year. Now we're introducing hyperautomation. So, some of these companies, feel like they've just been hit with this digital transformation and they're not quite ready for hyperautomation. So what, let's start with you, Bill. What do you feel are some of the do's and don'ts when, taking it to the next level of hyperautomation?
I've mentioned some, and I'll just briefly mention again. The one don't is don't think about it just in terms of technology. You've got to think about it in terms of technology, of process, and people. Right? It's a social and technical challenge. It's not just a technology challenge. The other don't would be, don't sit back on the sidelines and wait and see. That doesn't mean be reckless, but if the speed of change in technology is such that there's never going to be just a destination. Now we've arrived, now all of the uncertainty has been removed, and now I'm ready to step in. I don't recommend that. Rather, become educated, engage with higher education, form the partnerships, experiment, explore. Lori's mentioned this notion of taking an agile approach, of teaming and reteaming, you don't have to make radical change with your first step. You can make some incremental change, and you'll reach that point of confidence then to make more substantial changes. But my biggest concern is if you don't do those things, that your industry is going to pass you by. And I would say the same thing to employees and to our undergraduate students. If you're not prepared to adapt and evolve over your career, that the workforce opportunities are just going to pass you by, and it becomes then a self-fulfilling prophecy in the sense that, oh, what's going to happen to my job? I think what you'll find is you're not going to be concerned about what's going to happen to your job, because not only are you doing that, but you're being enriched along the way, and then you discover that next gem next opportunity, that next way to make a difference in the community and in the workforce. So those are just some of the do's and don'ts. And Carrie made a couple comments, and I was going to reserve these to maybe later in our conversation, but I'll bring one of them up right now. Just because we can do something with technology doesn't mean we should. And I say that because of the ethical dimensions of what we're doing. And this is something that we're trying to incorporate at all levels of our curriculum, and it's a work in progress, but for us. But we need we need to develop our students, to form our students in ways that they think about the ethical application of technology in the workplace. And I think nowhere is this more important when you're thinking about hyperautomation and you're thinking about some of the underlying technologies. And if you have done some reading about this, you see some of the issues that, for all the benefits of machine learning and deep learning, there are also problems with those technologies. And so we have to have a recognition about this. So one of the do's that I would put into the conversation is be thinking about the ethical dimensions of all that we do with technology. Just because we could do something with technology doesn't mean we should. And so those are just some of my initial thoughts to seed this conversation here. So I'll hand it back to you now, Tony.
No, that's excellent. That's excellent. Your thoughts, Carrie? Do's and don'ts?
Oh gosh, there's so much. Ethics is a big one, especially in medicine and genomics. Like, one of the things, I don't know if y'all saw the state of technology, but in my topic there, I had talked about in genomics where we learned in one study that 10% of the time, dad is not dad when you're dealing with children with critical chronic disease that is kind of rare. And it's like, okay, now you have this conversation that you have to have with the parents. And, you know, the data reveals one thing and you're having a conversation with them. What's the right way to handle that conversation? How do you break the news? Is it inconclusive? Could be, you know, there is that margin of error. There's a lot of things that go into it, and how do you bring compassion and have compassion for the people that we serve and walk in their shoes and be able to address them when data is telling you something. And I feel like medicine, you're constantly balancing that ethical dilemma of what's the right thing to do, what's the moral thing to do, as we learn more, and to be human about it and really care for people. So the do, definitely explore, push the boundaries, learn all you can, but the don'ts are don't harm people in the process.
Excellent. And Lori?
How do you follow that up? Wow, way to go, Carrie. Oh, I mean, it is so real and it is so relevant, and I'm just so glad you're there doing this. And so it's funny because when you asked this, Tony, it was, you know, what are the do's and what are the don'ts? And if you've noticed, we all start off with the don'ts and then with the do's. But and I, you know, kind of just can build on that, right? To me, part of it is what you don't want to do is just you know, if you have chaos in your process, don't automate chaos, right? Go really flesh it out, go do the right thing. I think it's really important as you mentioned it, right? And I talked about it in the very beginning. Think about it. If 80% of our companies are doing some form of automation, that could be just little tiny bits of automation, but only 7% are doing it at scale. You know, those are big, huge opportunities for all of the people here and all of our teams to really start to look at where is automation and how can we bring that to help us do better. But then as you also mentioned, and you think in the next 3 years, we're going to bring in the whole digital piece of this, right? People are now saying, companies are saying, let's go and invest in technology in this particular area because it's absolutely relevant right now. And if we're going to be 7 times what we're doing here, we're doing this to reduce risk, right? We're doing it to optimize costs, but at the end of the day, it's also to be resilient and drive growth, right? And to drive growth, you've got to look at not only what your business is doing, but how are your people enabled so that they can bring the best of themselves to be able to empower the company. So, I mean, to me, resiliency, being agile, surviving in a time when some companies are doing well and some are struggling, I think technology is going to help it. But for all of us, as we talked about that, the ethical side of this is really where that human piece comes in and says, let's do what's right. Right. So the do is do what's right, no matter what. Right. Can you look in the mirror and put your hand on your heart and know that you're doing the right thing? Or you see something that you stop and say, I need some help. The other do, we were talking about it earlier in some of our prep work is, just start, right? So for me, whenever my team is going, how do I go? How do I move forward? Part of those things I talk about is just start walking it down, right? Writing it down. How do you walk through your day? Write it down and then put it on the board or put it on a piece of paper and start to draw it out. And then what you're going to find out is you start asking some people, like the people in front of you and the people that you provide information to, what do they need? And the next thing you know, you're sitting in a design workshop that I'm sure Carrie and Bill were talking about, right? You do a design thinking and you say, what are our biggest BHAGs? What are the biggest things that we need to do? And the next thing you know, you've got other people collaborating with you on that journey. And you can ask your company as well, I want to think this way. What are some of the tools that you can help me with? And I'm sure your IT shop, I'm sure your groups that are probably thinking about this, but show them what your processes are and say, do you have any tools? I know we do, that says, let me go and do some click share. Let me do some different ways of documenting what I do. And then that just starts that journey. So don't be afraid to start writing it down, but start asking and collaborating. And I think that's where you can start personally each and every one of your own journeys. So that's my big do.
No, those are excellent points. And it actually kind of dovetails nicely with the question that came in. And I'll pose this to you.
Okay, let's go look.
So there's a segment of the population sitting in front of a computer screen all day, and it's not attractive, even with all the functionality that we have in computers and applications and data today. So naturally, continuous learning is very important. But what are your thoughts on like protecting hearing and eye health? Because we probably I didn't think about it, especially, but we probably are sitting much more in front of our computer screens than we were 6-12 months ago. And I was just curious to know your thoughts, and if somebody is experiencing needs a break, how would they approach a mentor or management to say, hey, I just need to change up my routine a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll all probably jump in. It's such a personal topic and it's really important. I think we all need to take moments and do a self-reflection of where we are and how well we're doing, right? And I know that with our company, we want people to have the ability to take a break. We all as leaders and managers have to look for mental health and physical health of our employees. And I've done daily touch points with my team, making sure that they're doing okay. It's not about the business. It's about, are they personally okay? But we also have to lead by example. We have to take time off. We have to stand up and walk around. We have to go and shorten some of our meetings. We need to give people think time. And we need to say it's okay to walk away from the screen. I know I do. What do we try to do? We try. I'm going to say this again. We try to do the 5-minute popcorn break, right? Which is, end your meeting 5 minutes early so you can get up and go get a piece, get some coffee, a popcorn, do something, right? But I also do all of my one-on-one meetings walking. I say, you know what? We can say hi on video, but I'm putting myself on my cell phone and let's all go out wherever we are, either walk in place or go for a walk, do some different things that are a little more creative in our current work environment. I had my husband make a stand for my computer. So it's just a big box. I mean, let's be honest, it was a good project for him. But it's a box and it literally, I can stand up and work, right? And you just have to find different ways. I personally worked in the office. I love the engagement of 450 people on the floor in an open landscape. Yeah, I can't have that right now, but I still have my sticky wall, on the board in front of me here. You can't see it, but it's fun. But you've got to find a way to make, your environment interesting, but you also have to tell your manager and your team, how are you doing, and find new ways to work a little differently. Because I'm right with, the individual who, I think it's Bruce, who asked about that, because it's hard. I'm tired by the end of the day of staring and looking at people on video. But I also know that it is my responsibility to personally do some things to make that different.
No, that's a great question, and I think now that you mentioned going for walks on one-on-one, I think I might try doing it from the golf course and see how.
You know what? Whatever it takes. We could go mobile, but we do need to have a little bit of fun along the way. Otherwise, it gets old and too routine.
Yeah. I know, Bill, you were nodding your head, but I think we might be short on time too. How are we doing, Emily? Does Bill have time to jump in real quick?
Yeah, we can have one last closing thought there. That would be great.
You want to add to that?
I don't know if I have anything more to add to that. I mean, it's a discipline. It's a way of life that you have to. If I had the answer to that, I probably would be doing something different. But it turns out I'm good at this job and not that job. So.
So final thoughts. What are your final thoughts then on Hyper?
Well, I'll be very brief. When I think about final thoughts about this conversation, I recognize this is a process. It's a journey, but it's not one where the destination is so much important as making sure that we're on that journey. And we need to hold on because technology is going to continue to change. And when I look especially at higher education and our role in this, I have visions for our different programs, but the most important thing that I recognize is access. If we're not providing access, whether it's to the working professional or to someone who wants to enter the workforce, then we're not doing our job. And we need to continue to focus on how can we broaden access to our programs so that people can make more contributions in the workplace, better contributions.
No, that's excellent. And Carrie, your final thoughts?
So I had to pull out the Digital Doctor book, great book to read, and read out of page 277 that said the relationship between a doctor and a patient does not feel transactional now, and I don't think it will then. Rather, it will remain vital, scary, ethically charged, and deeply human. And so the hyperautomation will continue. Our world will change as we know it. And as Bill had mentioned, the axe and saw are very different tools, but both useful. And we'll have to learn to apply the tool properly, but always remember to be human.
Awesome. And Lori, take us home.
How could I follow that up? Man, Carrie, you're awesome. Bill, you're great. I love being part of this panel. Technology, as we talked about, is going to enable us, but it is ours to embrace it and to do that with grace and compassion, and do that in such an ethical way that makes all of us bring that human side of it. And so what I implore everyone to do is to learn, to see, and to embrace, and you will have meaningful and impactful ways and solutions as we go forward. So be part of that change.
Awesome messages in here. I'll turn it over to you, Emily, because I know we're getting close to that hour 10. So
thank you so much. What an amazing discussion. I'm learning all the time from you all, and it's always a wonderful discussion with our talent network. And I just wanted to say another thank you to our presenting sponsor for this network, APC, and our supporting sponsors as well. And to all the panelists, again, I'll be making this available as a recording. We'll follow up with all the attendees either later this afternoon or tomorrow. And we're just a week away from our Outlook for Tech event, which will, of course, talk more about trends. So I'm sure you'll hear a little bit more, about automation and digital transformation there. So be sure to sign up for that. And I hope you'll have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you, everyone, so much for attending, and have a great day.